Can you tell me your full name and when and where you were born?
Jackie Allen Kirkland, Jr. I was born on June 11th, 1973, here in Texarkana, Arkansas. Well, it's actually Texas because the hospital was on the Texas side.
How long have you lived in Arkansas and in what part of the state?
I have been an Arkansan all my life and lived in Texarkana, or a surrounding community, all my life, which is 52 years now.
What was your childhood like growing up in Arkansas?
I'm going to assume it was like most kids' childhoods, growing up in the 70s and 80s. We did a lot of hunting and outdoor activities. There was only one TV in the room, or in the house, and it was in the living room, and it was black and white and only got about 3 channels. So as a kid, we didn't enjoy all the technology that you guys have today. So we spent a lot more time outside and building things with our own hands and getting dirty.
Awesome. What kind of work did your parents do?
Well, when I was young, Mom was a stay-at-home mom, and Dad was a plumber. He's been a plumber all my life. He was self-employed when I was a kid, and still is today. Mom eventually, after we got older, went back into the workforce and did a lot of bookkeeping, and she's worked at numerous places, different companies in town, the college at one point, or both colleges actually at one point, in their record-keeping, bookkeeping departments.
What schools did you attend and what was education like when you were growing up?
Well, my elementary school time was done at College Hill Elementary, which was only 1 block behind our house where we lived on College Hill. So I walked to elementary school. That was 1st through 4th grade. Then the 5th and 6th grade was at a place called Washington, which does not exist as a school anymore, but is now like a community center. But the building's still there. Then 7th, 8th, and 9th grade were at College Hill Junior High on Forest Street. Those were good days, late 80s. Then 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade was at Arkansas High School on Jefferson. And that was where I graduated from. I'm a Razorback.
Awesome.
Education, what was it like? I forgot the second half of the question. Those are the schools I attended, but it was pretty basic, I would imagine, like what you guys do today. There was not an option in high school to really do much dual credit stuff like you guys have today for gaining college credit. I did take some pretty high-powered courses, I guess you could say, as a junior and senior in high school with pre-calculus and chemistry and stuff, but I don't recall there being the possibility for dual credit. Maybe a couple of those classes might have gave you some college credit, I'm not sure, but pretty straightforward education.
How would you describe your community when you were a child or young adult?
My community. Well, like I said, I grew up on College Hill. Not particularly looked at by most of the city as being one of the prime places to raise up kids, I don't guess, but it was all right for us. All the kids in the area, we would play together and knew each other, and there was a little grocery store across the street, and then there was a little place called the Dairy Cup, which was just 1 block up from my house, and they made hamburgers, and you could go up there and get ice cream cones and stuff. And so community-wise, we had what we needed pretty much right there within walking distance. Grocery store across the street, little hamburger joint, just right there 1 block. And school was just 1 block behind, at least, elementary was. And even the other schools weren't too far. You could drive to them in 5 minutes. But we played together outside. That was the community. It was good.
What kinds of traditions or family activities were important in your household?
Well, tradition-wise, in our household at least, our family activities often centered around what Mom and Dad were interested in, and my parents were always kind of outdoorsy, so it was a tradition. We always went to the lake in the summertime. Mom and Dad were real faithful to go camping pretty regular. In the summer, we would spend our time on Lake Greeson, which is just north of here, about an hour and a half. Some people call it Narrows, but most of my summers were spent there learning how to water ski and tube. And when we couldn't afford to go to Lake Greeson for a full weekend trip, sometimes we would go out to Lake Texarkana. Dad had a bass ski combination boat, so we would fish out of it and tube and ski behind it out at Lake Rat-Patman, which is the local Texarkana lake. Hunting season was always a big deal. Opening week of deer season was a big deal for the family, so we would typically all go to deer camp together and hunt. And back then we even had squirrel camp in the spring, so that was a big deal. I don't think people really do that anymore. Not too much anyway. So we would go squirrel hunting up around the Casa Tot area north of here, and we would have a squirrel camp in the spring. As far as other traditions, we always had the big ones. Thanksgiving and Christmas were holidays that we celebrated with family and always had a big meal and tried to get as much of the family together as possible. Family was maybe a little more important back then than it is now. I don't know. It seems like the families have gotten smaller, I guess, with time, and I know it's expensive to raise kids, so we had bigger families back then, and family reunions were a big deal to my dad. Mom's side, not so much, but Dad's side, we would always travel to wherever the family reunion was being held that year, and there would be a lot of people there, maybe 100 people, different family members, people we'd seen one time a year. But that was kind of a big deal when I was growing up as a kid, and I remember looking forward to those. That probably pretty well covers most of the family traditions and activities. We always outside, always in the woods or on the lake.
Cool. How have you seen your town or community change over time?
Oh, well, the town has changed considerably. It's a lot bigger now than it was when I was a kid. Primarily, it's grown to the Texas side of town. Texarkana being a twin city, it's kind of an odd place because you have both Texarkana, Arkansas, and then Texarkana, Texas. I think there are a couple other places in the United States where there are twin cities, but Texarkana is pretty unique in that. And mostly town has grown on the Texas side, probably more so than the Arkansas side. Community's changed a lot in even just like the stores, because when I was a kid, there were little food chains like Piggly Wiggly was the grocery market. There was a place called Howard's on State Line, which was kind of just a general store. They would have guns and ammo and stuff like that too. This was before Walmart became a thing. There were a lot of smaller grocery stores on the corners, or like I said, we had one across the street from our house, and a lot of times that's where supper would come from. Walk across the street and gather up what few items you needed and, make supper. But now with the expansion of Walmart, and they kind of pushed a lot of the smaller mom and pop grocery stores out. People tend to buy more bulk, I think, and for longer periods of time, go to the store once or twice a month and buy a big bill of groceries and make it last, whereas back then you couldn't really afford to buy that much food at one time, so you bought food every few days, but that's changed a lot. Of course, the infrastructure of town, with it growing, the roads are busier and there's more of them and a lot more concrete than there was back then. Everything seems like it's paved nowadays. A lot more gravel roads back then too, especially in the county. Now pretty much everything is, if it's not asphalt, it has the semblance of being asphalt, which most all the county roads now are that way. I don't see the grader running very much.
What role did church, local events, or community gatherings play in your life?
Well, church was a big deal. Mom and Dad have always been believers in Jesus, and I was raised Baptist, so I grew up at a little church called Highland Hills on Highway 82, and Mom and Dad both served there, and Dad was a deacon a lot of my teenage years, and that's where I was saved. And so church was a big deal. I mean, we were really involved in the youth group, and we did a lot of trips, vacation Bible schools, things like that. The local events, I don't recall too much about local events. Texarkana, even though it's kind of a hub, or at least located in a geographic hub area, it's not really ever had a big draw for like a concert venue or anything like that. So when you say local events, really, I mean, everybody always looked forward to the fair coming to town. That was a big deal. And that's changed too. It was always in the fall around football season when I was growing up, and even as an adult up until, I guess, maybe the pandemic area. That's when it changed, but they moved it to the spring, which it always rained. You could count that when the fair came to town, it was going to start raining. So those two kind of went hand in hand. Not much else that I particularly recall about like local events. They used to have, and I think they still do, the Watermelon Festival in Hope, and that was kind of a big deal that time of year, like summertime, late summer, when all the watermelons were getting harvested. That was a pretty big event, and it's been around a long time. Not much else local event-wise that really pops up in my head. Community gatherings, not so much. I mean, we didn't really have like block parties or anything like that back in the day, so those are relatively new ideas that communities do, I think, for the most part, or at least that's how mine was.
What are some of the most significant events or milestones?
Oh, some of the most significant events. Well, at 19, I found out I was going to be a dad for the first time. At 20, that would be with my son Jacob. At 20, I went in business for myself and bought my first home. And I think we gave $42,000 or $44,000 for our first house, which was on Big Rock Circle, and got married. Then my second child came along just a couple of years after that, which would be Mason. And I plugged along for a long time, and the marriage was not great, but the kids are awesome, and ended up getting divorced when they were like 8 and 6 or 10 and 8, somewhere in there, around 2000. And then I met your mother, and we were married. And actually we met in 2002, and I think we got married in 2005. And Joshua came along. She already had a son named Alan, and he was the same age as Jacob, so they didn't particularly ever get along, but they were the same age, and they did in high school later become friends and ended up playing football together. So we had Alan and Jacob and Mason, which were all older kids because we both had them when we were young. And then after we got married in 2005, Joshua came along in 2006, and then Isabella came along in 2008. And that was enough for us as far as kids go. But then